Right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar organized as part of the EU Alliance project funded by the COSME program of the European Union. My name is Thierry Louvet, Europe and International Affairs Director at Systematic. Systematic is the deep tech cluster based in the Paris region. And we are one of the partners of the in the EU Alliance project. So as you can see from the first slide, this webinar is dedicated to the Canada mission, planned for the end of May, early June 2023. And the aim of this webinar is to share information with you about the objectives and content of this mission. Before I briefly go through the program, we have just a quick reminder of the etiquette, as it were, of this webinar, just to remind those who are not speaking to remember to mute your microphone. And for those who are not speakers, if you could please also switch off your camera. There is, as you can see, if you're familiar with Teams, a conversation channel, a chat box channel, which is available for you to put your questions. There will be times during the webinar where we can do that. And yes, highly recommended for speakers to use microphone headset. I'm not using a microphone headset, so as long as you know that it's working and it's operational, we'll see that in a few minutes. So having done this, I will just now go briefly through the program, the agenda of our webinar. We will start, first of all, with an introduction to the EU Alliance project by Julie Rafton-Jolivet of Tectera. And Tectera and Julie are the coordinator of this project, of the EU Alliance project. After this introduction by Julie, we'll have Colonel Loïc Bonnevie, who will give us an overview of Canada's defense market. And we'll have time for a few minutes for questions at this point after Mr. Bonnevie's presentation. And then we'll have a sequence where we'll have 3 other speakers. First of all, Mr. Bruno DUVAL, CEO of CityPassenger, who will share with us his experience working in Canada. We'll have Mr. Jean-François Lupien and Mr. Yann Borgne, who will respectively give a zoom, as it were, on the provinces of Quebec and Ontario. And we will finish with the presentation of the call for interest to apply to the mission and an update on the current status of the program of the mission itself. And we'll finish this webinar with a question and answer session.
Une visio sur le business qui se développe au Canada, mais comme c'est en anglais et l'autre il parle en...
Okay, thank you. Please mute your phone. That's why we have etiquette for the webinars. If you don't speak, please mute your microphone. Thank you very much. Right. I will now give the floor to Julie Rafton-Jolivet.
Yes.
For the introduction to the project. The floor is yours, Julie.
Thank you, Thierry. So good afternoon and welcome everyone. So as Thierry just mentioned, my name is Julie Rafton. I am working at Tectera. Tectera is the French innovation cluster dedicated to the French textile industry. And Tectera and myself, we are also the coordinator of the EU Alliance program, EU Alliance project. And I'm going to take a few minutes to introduce the program. On the next slide. So EU Alliance is a European project and it's co-funded by the European Union under the COSME program. EU Alliance stands for European Alliance for International Business Development on Advanced Materials and Connectivity for Defense and Security Markets. So as you can understand from this title, we cover a broad scope of industries, both for military and civilian applications. I'm sorry, can you mute your mic, please? Thank you very much.
Oui, mais...
Thank you. So we cover a broad scope of industries, I was saying, both in civilian and military applications, concerning specifically advanced materials, including technical textiles, advanced technologies, deep tech, connectivity, and basically all type of dual-use products, technologies, or services. Our objective in this program is to support the internationalization of European SMEs through dedicated services that we provide, and encourage intra-European collaboration and synergies between European SMEs through the partners of the project. And during this program, we have targeted 4 countries. The US. So we were in the US last October. We were in Indonesia last February. Next week we will be in Japan with 12 companies, and we are now opening our activities on Canada. Regarding the partners of the project, as I was saying, we really want to cover a broad scope of industries in dual-use application. So you can see here the 6 partners of the project. So I just introduced Tectera textile cluster in France. We have 2 other textile clusters in Italy, NTT and Pointex. Then we have a systematic deep tech cluster in France, CIT, connectivity cluster in Italy. And then we have NIDV, which is the Netherlands Defense and Security Association, so for the Dutch government. Regarding our activities that we are launching today for Canada, we have several objectives there. The first one is to make the European SMEs discover the local markets. And for that, we have several types of services. We have this webinar today. You will be able to gather precious information on the defense market in Canada today. And one of the main objective is to organize a mission in Canada at the end of May, early June. So once we will be there, for us, the idea is really to allow you to identify business opportunities, partnership opportunities, carry out technological and business monitoring, and we will support you in all the logistical support and preparatory phase, and also beyond the mission. Facilitate and accelerate the contacts. So for that, we are targeting some events. We are organizing matchmaking activities, providing market information. And then really the idea is to open as many doors as we can for you once we are there and before. And then the last objective is really to have this connection between also European SMEs. All members of the six clusters and beyond. So that's for the objective, and I think I will now leave the floor. Thierry, thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie. Thanks for this introduction. So effectively, I will give the floor to Colonel Bonnevie. Is the Deputy Defense Attaché at the Embassy in France, based actually in Washington, but covering the Canadian defense sector. So Colonel Bonnevie, the floor is yours for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Thierry. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody in Europe. I'm Colonel Loïc Bonnevie. So yeah, I'm based in Washington, but I also serve as a Defense Cooperation Attaché in Canada, and I am assisting the Defense Attaché working in Ottawa to basically represent my agency, DGA, the General Directorate for Armaments in Canada. So thank you for the opportunity of presenting this rapid overview of the defense market in Canada. And the bottom line is it's a small but growing market. There are opportunities, especially in innovative market, the innovative part of the market. And what really differs from other markets is this official offset policy or ITB policy, meaning industrial technology benefits. So let's start. Next slide, please. On the first two parts of the slides, on the left you have the planned spending that they were pursuing based on a strategy called SSE, Strong, Secured, Engaged. And this is what they planned in 2016 or 2017 and constantly updated it. And you see the orange arrow, it's focusing on what they were due to, do on the procurement spendings, meaning for equipment. And on the right side, this is what they actually did in terms of actual spending. And you see, so in terms of procurement, they're not really reaching their objectives. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. But this is not a matter of funding. The funding is here. And they basically used it for other things because they were not really able to spend as much as they intended on procurement. And you can see that on the bottom left slide. So basically what they're trying to do now is to update their strategy and to plan to spend even more in the next coming years. And that's what you see on the bottom right picture. If we move to the next slide, you can see that there is a margin for improving in terms of NATO standards, as Canada is really below the NATO guideline of defense expenditure of 2% of their GDP. Now they are rather located at 1.4. And also they do not reach their goals of having 20% of their defense budget focused on procuring new equipments for their armed forces. If we move to the next slide, these are what the defense market, the Canadian defense market looks like in terms of importations they're doing. The source is the site price, so it's the Stockholm International Organization. It doesn't really catch every trade, and what's maybe will it is very surprising is you don't see any sale from France or Italy. But as I said, it doesn't catch every sale, and especially, for instance, B2B sales. If we in the recent history, there were maybe if you read the news, some major bids which the European defense companies have failed winning. So I have in mind one called the CSC, Canadian Surface Combatant. It's basically frigates for 15 frigates, and it was a French-Italian bid, and it didn't win. And another was for the fighter aircraft, which eventually was won by Lockheed Martin with the F-35. But as I said, it's the major bids is not necessarily what really matters for SMEs. So I suggest to move to the next slide. And this is basically what the DND, so the Department of the National Defense in Canada looks like. And I want to highlight in red the entities which have a role in acquisitions. So on the left, you have ADM, the Assistant Deputy Minister for Material, ADM MAT. They are really in charge of managing defense acquisition programs. You have then the Assistant Deputy the Assistant Deputy Minister for Defense Research and Development Canada, ADM DRDC. They are in charge of SNT for the Canadian forces. You have ADM IM for information management. They are in charge of all the information networks, cloud things, and cyber things. And of course, you have the forces, the Navy, the Army, and the Air Force, or also the Special Forces. All of those guys, they have requirements. They define their own requirements early in the process, and and some of them, especially the Special Forces, they have their own authorities to procure their stuff. And on the bottom right, you have even the NORAD, the North American Aerospace Air Defense Organization. It's also something special with the US, which has its own budget requirements and sometimes authority to procure. So if we move to the next slide and really talking about defense procurement, the responsibilities are really split into mainly three parts of the government. The first one is Public Services and Procurement Canada, PSPC. They have the contracting authority for every contract of more than 5 million Canadian dollars. This is really a huge responsibility, and this includes defense. There is then the Department of National Defense, which basically is in charge of setting the requirements, but also of sustaining equipment and managing defense programs and budget. And another ministry in charge of things related to defense procurement is called Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada. So basically the Ministry of Industry, and they are in charge of managing what they call industrial and technology benefits, meaning offsets, when foreign companies are trying to sell things to the Canadian government. There is a goal of imposing 100% offset of the value of the contract. And of course, I didn't mention the other agency or the parliament, but obviously all those entities play a role in defense procurement. Next slide, please. So here I won't delve into every of the Canadian Defense Ministry priorities, but you can quite easily find them on the departmental plan of the DND. And the main point I would like to raise is the priority here is for the Air Force with the fighters and strategic tankers and transport capabilities. For the Navy, and for the Navy, there is also there is a big emphasis on the Arctic, and the NORAD is another really big priority for Canada, and it's basically not really, you know, for mainly for Canadian and American companies. It's very hard to enter this specific market, and a last thing. So land forces, they have less priority and less budget for modernizing their equipment, but there are still opportunities, especially for urgent requirements, urgent operations. And countering, for instance, UAS, countering drones is one increasingly big priority. So if we move to the next slide, it's you can find it in the R&D priorities led by the DRDC Assistant Deputy Minister. And here again, I won't really delve into the priorities, but they are quite the same as in every big country. And what's interesting is they have this sandbox mode, broad agency announcements, which are open to foreign companies, and it's called ideas programs. And there, if you search on the internet or click on this link, there is this program which you can apply for. Okay, and if we move to the next slide. So I would like to mention also export control, because defense procurement is also a matter of control. You probably know that depending on what you're selling, you can't sell it without you know, the authorization of your country. And the Canadian export control, it's they are you know, having similar rules and regulations as basically everywhere else, with two main categories. So dual use categories for, they call it controlled goods regulation. It's for yeah, dual use products and services, and they have what they call the Export and Imports Permits Act, which really regulates what are the categories of products and which types of authorization are required. One specificity they have in Canada is they don't require an export license when they are to export for exporting to the United States. So, and maybe another thing I would like to highlight is this is quite normal export control rules. And do not forget that your own domestic law also applies when you're trying to export to Canada. And basically for France, there is a law on dual use products, and also a law on military and arms products and services. So make sure you comply with that. If we move to the next slide, So maybe if I'd like to highlight what makes it special in Canada. As I said, PSPC, so they have access. They are really the authority for every contract of more than 5 million Canadian dollars. There's a typo in the slide. I'm sorry. I see. I wanted to talk a bit about the Canadian regulation, and one trade agreement that you have seen is the CETA, Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement between Canada and the EU. So right now it's not fully ratified, so it's only a temporary and partial application since its inception in 2017. And anyway, it doesn't really concern defense procurement. Well, on dual-use products and things like that, or sales or B2B sales, that might be interesting for small companies. And on Canadian regulation, there is also another principle of transparency and fair competition. And basically, this is very similar to what you will find in many countries. But there are some legal exceptions for national security motives, of course. This is the reason why some markets are not so much accessible. I already talked about the offsets, the ITBs. The objective is the 100%, but on average, what they actually fulfill is a 63% of this objective, meaning that on average, foreign companies really do 63% of what they promised, and usually they comply fully at the contract signature at something like between 30 and 50%, and then the rest is promises. And this figure shows that they do not complete all of their promises. At least it really takes time. And the budget, the Canadian budget, is voted by great objectives. So only 5 lines in the law: ready forces, capability acquisition, defense team, preparing the future, operations, internal services. So you won't see any details in in the budget, in the vote of the budget, and there is not so much place for lobbying at this budget voting place. The last thing I wanted to highlight is there is not so much industrial policy. I mean, the basic industrial policy is offsets, but there is one exception. It's for Navy shipbuilding. They have a national shipbuilding strategy, meaning every big ship, it needs to be built in Canada. And if we moved to the next slide, I would like to say there are challenges for Canada. The biggest one, I think, is, well, they lack workforce. We saw that earlier. They lack workforce for really achieving what they are planning to do. And also, they over the 20 next years, they are the big programs they have already launched. They will consume most of it already. So there is not so much place for other programs. That said, lots of small programs or R&D programs will be launched, and that might be a good opportunity for SMEs. Maybe something about intellectual property, as I think it's really relevant for a small company, well, every industry. Canada is very demanding on the IP requirements, usually, to ensure they will be able to sustain fully their capabilities via their domestic DTIB. And of course, they have also some international commitments to Five Eyes and NORAD, making it reserving parts of their spendings to companies of the good national eyes only. So if we move to the next slide, and I think this is all I have, is in the GA, we are here. One of our missions is to help French companies export. This is why we have an international directorate, not the only reason why, but obviously one of them. And you have my contact here, my email address, and I want to make sure that you also have our desk officer in Paris, who is could be very helpful to discuss with him your strategy for exporting to Canada. And again, please feel free to contact us and discuss about that in detail related to your project, as we might help you, and there are some, export control issues that sometimes it's better to discuss before doing something weird. That said, I think I am finished now. I thank you for these opportunities, and if you have any questions, I'm open.
Thank you, Colonel Bondi. Thank you very much for this very complete presentation. Effectively, if you have a few more minutes before we move on to the next speakers, if you have questions, you can either raise your hand if you are familiar with Teams, and then speak, open your microphone, or you can do so in the chat if you are more at ease with that. So while you think about some question, maybe if I may shoot one directly to you, Colonel Bonnevi, one about SMEs, as you know, the project is very much around SMEs. What would be, and I know it's a very generic question, but what would be your best advice, or the advice based on your experience, for SMEs entering the Canadian security and defense market? Is there a sort of, prerequisites or absolute things to have in mind in order to enter this market? Based on your requirements or your advice, what would it be at this point?
Okay, so I think I would have two advices for that. The one would be to contact us, because there are often not really a unique solution. It's usually depends on the company and his products and its own strategy. So that would be my first advice. And my second one, I think, would be, but it's, again, it depends, but on average, I would say finding a good partner in Canada, and meaning an industrial partner, private one, is a good way, because if you do that, you're not really you don't have to deal with the offsets or ITBs, and this is, yeah, but doesn't mean that it's a good advice for everybody.
Okay. Thank you very much. I do not see any questions in the chat or any hands raised. But anyway, you've got very kindly, Colonel Bonnevie has shared his email, and also his colleague from the DGA in Paris. So obviously, don't hesitate to do that. I understand that we are dealing with sensitive information there, obviously, and you might want only to share this with the relevant people. That's perfectly understandable. So if that's okay, we're going to move on. And thanks again, Colonel Bonnevie, for your presentation. And please feel free to stay with us if you have a bit more time. Be very kind. Then we're going to move to the next phase of our program, which is dealing with what actually you can do in Canada. And we are very pleased to welcome Mr. Bruno DUVAL, CEO of CityPassenger. CityPassenger is a member of Systematic. And Bruno has been in Canada for many, many years. I believe you can tell us how many you have been in Canada. And maybe briefly introduce your company and tell us what basically is your experience, even though I know it's not strictly speaking in the defense and security market. But you can tell us a bit more about that. But what your recommendations are to SMEs when wanting to develop business in Canada. So the floor is yours, Bruno, for 10 minutes.
Thanks, Thierry, and hi everybody.
20 minutes. Sorry, I said 10 minutes. You got 20 minutes. So
okay. So yes, we are established in Canada since 2006. By now, the company in fact exists since 2001, so more than 20 years in France. We're established in France, in Paris region, and we design since in fact the beginning, at least, some security products oriented SDN, what we call now SDN, software design network products, like we virtualized firewalls and Wi-Fi controllers mostly. And we selling it as a SaaS product by service, in fact. So we're not selling it as a hardware solution. We're selling it as a pure software and by subscription product. The company is selling mostly in Europe today. We have most of our customers are in France, but we also have customers in Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal. And UK, and we have some customers, and I will come back later on it in Canada, but it was not our first target. The company has offices. The company staff is about 20 people today, and we have offices too in Montpellier, in the south of France, in Montreal in Canada since 2006, and 2018 in Casablanca in Morocco too. So just to explain how we are organized. I would say that first we went to Canada first just to try to establish, to try to see, in fact, when we came, the first moment we decided to establish our business in Canada was to see if there is something to do to try to address the North American market. And between 2006 and 2010 around, we sent some what we call in France some VEI. I don't know if it's something known everywhere in Europe. It's some people from France, young people, people less than 30 years old, and that is usually people just have their own diplomas. They just get their diploma and want to have an international experience. In Canada, usually you can send them for 2 years. And we sent some people the first year in 2006. We sent somebody with the focus on selling to try to see how we could address the Canadian market first. And in the second part, we sent some more technical people to develop our service, because in fact the Canadian people like, as it was said before by the previous speaker, they like having some service. So it's difficult to address a business there if you don't have a local service to address this business. So and at the time we had some customers, some local customer, and we developed a small activity locally for addressing this business. So in security, firewalling, and on Wi-Fi business. And after 2010, we sent a technical manager there. So and we decided to more focus our business on technical development. And we sent people who was working in France since 2 years. We sent him in Canada to develop a team there. And the team continued to be mostly based on VEI, so technical people coming from short diploma from school, from engineering schools. And and some local people, trainees, we used to hire there. It's a school around Montreal. There's plenty of schools there and universities. So it's quite simple to hire people there. And we established, in fact, a kind of R&D pole in that in our office in Montreal. And since so what we learned, what I could say locally, what we learned how to establish business is quite simple. That is something we don't see here in France. So you can, when we established a business in 2006, the company was established, but there is something. I'm not a lawyer. I can't explain very well, but the company was established, but was not completely established. So for 2 or 3 years, I don't remind, the company was registered, but it was not completely finished or something like that. And but you can work. You have all the authorization to work and to send some people. But there was something mixed, and we decided to completely finish the operation of settlement there in 2008 or 2011, something like that. And that's it. You need a lawyer there to it's North America, so it's better if you have a lawyer, in fact, and a local lawyer. So there is plenty of lawyer around. So there is some the Montreal International or Quebec, the searcher of Quebec can help you to find a local lawyer to help if you want to establish your business there. It's very easy. And you need also an accountant. So we choose the first accountant that was I don't remember how we had the name at the moment, but I think it's via also a Chamber of Commerce or Montreal International, something like that. And you need an accountant for all the local business. And that's what the two first point to have for beginning a business. There is nothing very difficult more than that. To find some premise, it's quite also easy. There's plenty of premise. There is not a lot of guarantee you need to give. It's not like in France. I don't know how is it elsewhere in Europe, but in France you need to have something like 3 months of guarantee. It's not the case in Montreal. It's completely different. So and you pay people locally per 2 weeks. So you don't pay per month like in Europe. You pay per 2 weeks, and so it needs a small organization to when you are not used to for that. So you really need an accountant locally for managing that. Holidays, vacation, it's 2 weeks. So I could say that it's not it's 2 weeks per year. And when people have some, you can negotiate that. Can be, and you can negotiate 3 weeks or stuff like that. Usually, it's not much more at the beginning, and it's considered like a 2%. It's 2% or 4% of salary for the people you hire. It's like an increase of salary for the local people, and tax is much better than tax here in Europe, in France at least. And the tax for the wage cost is 5%, 5 or 6% perhaps now, and the payroll tax is 12%. So well, that's it. And the VAT is 15%. So if once you pay that, everything is quite paid. You just need a complementary health insurance for the employees. You need you hire there to anticipate. That's it. What could I say more for all the company who want to settle their business there? When you sell business to business, as we do, the customers are looking really for service more than just a product, and it's really important to have people to ensure the service locally, and to be sure that because the customers are going to buy really for because you have the service behind, in fact, not just because you have a good and beautiful product. So service is much more important than product at the end. And that's it for this point. So easy to find office, I would say, to resume. Easy to recruit. You have to know also that people are not conflictual at all. So when you have a discussion, it's very difficult sometimes for European people to have something quite to discuss frankly with them. It's not, there is no fighting between people. So sometimes there are situations that are quite difficult to solve if you don't have a frank frontal discussion. So it's quite unusual for French and for I think European people, and that's it. I would say. Perhaps there are some questions. There is 2 main streets. Montreal is organized. There is the west side is mostly the business side is more focused on the business and the English-speaking part of Montreal, and the east side is more French-speaking part. That's it. And there is 2 main streets. Most of the companies, and the business street is called René Lévesque Street Avenue. And a lot of companies are settled their business on René Lévesque, where everything is concentrated. Most of the business is concentrated. Some, when you need a lot of place, a lot of areas, there is some in René Lévesque. There is some also some workplace like incubator or place you can share your space you can share for working. and also whereas people, the companies are elsewhere around in Laval, it's much further. Transportation is not so easier. So when you set up your business, it's easier and you don't need a lot of place at the first. It's really easier to be in a center around René Lévesque Avenue. And that's it. Is there some question?
Thank you, Bruno. What we'll do, we'll take the questions after we've heard from the two representatives from the Canadian provinces, if that's okay with you, Bruno. I saw already somebody has put a question in the chat, but as we are dealing with the sort of outlook of the two provinces, I will just leave this afterwards, if that's okay. If you can stay with us for a bit more time. Thanks very much for that, Bruno. Our next speaker is actually from the Investissement Québec International, Mr. Jean-François Lupien, and you're the Foreign Direct Investment Director at Investissement Québec International, and you're based in Paris. Welcome, Jean-François. The floor is yours for 10 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Thierry. Do you have the presentation right now?
Yes,
or yes,
we have it, and you can say when you want to see the next slide.
Perfect. So next slide, please. So first of all, yes, I'll just introduce myself again. Jean-François Lupien. I am part of Invest Quebec, which is the economic development agency of the province of Quebec. So to make a comparison, like in the United States, you would have states. Well, in Canada, we have provinces. Each province has its own like government, a lot of autonomy compared to the regions here in France, might be also the equivalent in Italy, for example. So we are based out of Paris at the Quebec delegation here. That is not an embassy, but does have kind of the same status, and it's only in France. And then most of our job basically is to talk with international businesses and then to try to convince them and really support them in building and growing a subsidiary in Quebec. So we also are a public bank. So we manage 22 billions in terms of assets. So we do invest, we do finance, we do fund. But my mandate is mostly really to support and attract and retain foreign businesses to Quebec. So as many of you, maybe not all of you, might know, Quebec is the French-speaking province of Canada. That doesn't mean that we do not speak English, as you can hear. We do have a very strong economy, the second after Ontario, and then Yann will step in just after about Ontario. What's very nice about Quebec is that the economy is very diverse. Based on the main topic of this conversation today. So we talk about the textiles, we talk about cybersecurity, technology, the army. So Quebec and mostly Montreal is very well known for its tech industry. AI, for example, is a very good example. Quebec is also well known for its competitiveness in Canada, mostly because the operating costs are always a little lower than all the major cities in North America. Also, the Canadian dollar is helping if compared to the US. So very briefly, why Quebec? Strategic location, very well positioned in North America. For the French businesses that are on the call, well, obviously, the bilingual situation is always helping. Even though the business environment in Quebec is pretty much North American, the values and the language, I would say, are a little bit more French. Well, the language, obviously, but the values as well. There are a lot of very skilled workers in Quebec. I would say I have mentioned the competitive costs. Again, 25% operating cost advantage compared to all the major regions in Canada and the US. A lot of incentives that we manage at Invest Quebec. So we are responsible for many of them, tax credits, subsidies. And also I would say the province is very well known as well for the quality of life. As you may know someone that lived there, maybe you studied there, maybe you traveled there for leisure. So the city is well known for its joie de vivre. So we do hear that very often. Next slide. So as I said, very well located. The city of Montreal, its airport allows you to really travel quite easily in North America. In this case, I would say that the mission is concentrated mostly on Ottawa and the federal government. However, I would doubt that you decide to go in North America solely for Canada. Even though we do have a beautiful country in terms of army and the budget, that the money that we inject in like armies and all the technologies in there are, I mean, we do inject some money, but compared to the United States, obviously this market might be a lot more interesting in phase 2, phase 3 of you putting your business in North America. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, what's very great about the province is that we have a diverse economy, which means a very few sectors in which we have like top talent, top expertise. Video game, creative industries are obviously number one. Major businesses are there, Ubisoft, Epic Games. Even though you might not see the direct link with this, you should know that a lot of people working in video games are also working in the cybersecurity industry and then the textile and these kind of things, like, because it might sound, well, actually, no, it doesn't, but all the 3D and then everything that you have to develop for the textiles and then the advanced textiles and fabrics that you guys would put on, there might be some links to do with the video game industry also. There's a very strong aerospace ecosystem. It's the second in North America after Seattle. It's a major one. It's the third in the world, second in North America. And there's also a very nice hub in terms of life science and health technology. So we do have, like recently, Moderna decided to open a new facility for the vaccines in Quebec. And the other thing is cybersecurity is also something that we're putting a lot of effort. I wouldn't say that Canada is necessarily like a powerhouse in terms of cybersecurity yet. Depends on like verticals. There are some verticals in which we're very good, but we're building this ecosystem, and there's a lot to do. And then obviously businesses like yours would be very welcomed. Next slide. So I've mentioned the software development IT sector. As you can see, a little more than 230,000 professionals are available in the province. It's more than 7,000 companies. And then 9 out of the 10 largest technology companies in the world have offices in Quebec, Montreal, Quebec City, Sherbrooke. You see a few names. Those are just a few, as I said, but the major ones. To give you an idea also of the dynamic of the economy and the ecosystem in Quebec. So during the pandemic, the province of Quebec was the only province in the country that did not decrease its economic activity. Actually, it increased, and it was the only province where it happened. So we were not really affected by the pandemic in terms of economy. Next slide, please. I've also mentioned that Montreal might be very well known for its AI ecosystem. There are a bunch of big business, the GAFAM are there, Google, Microsoft, Samsung. There's a lot of research that is being done. We are lucky enough to have Yoshua Bengio, who's like a mastermind in AI. He was kind of the magnet that really attracted so many businesses to Montreal. You know, AI was completely absent from Montreal like 20 years ago, and now it's a powerhouse in terms of this very specific sector. That can be very useful in your activities, obviously. Next slide. I've mentioned aerospace, so very major brands and then business that you will see: Airbus, Bombardier, CAE, Bell Helicopter, Pratt & Whitney, Mitsubishi are there, Thales, Safran. Those are mostly, they're there for the aerospace industry, but I would say Thales and Safran are also working on the defense as well. Next slide. And then I would finish with this. I've mentioned that the ecosystem is really aiming towards attracting a lot of businesses. Cybersecurity is something that we're trying to build. The government decided to create the new Ministry of Cybersecurity and Digital Transformation 2 years ago. So we do have a minister that is dedicated entirely to this ecosystem. So basically what happened is that with that, we created a lot of incentives. You do see a bunch of them here. Some are aiming towards key projects, innovation, dedicated to some sectors, if it's the development of softwares, if you do R&D. So obviously, I will not go through every and each of them, but if you have questions, if you feel like you would like to know a little bit more about what's in there for you, obviously I suggest that we chat after this presentation about it. And next slide, I think it's the last one, and it is. So that was it. I will leave the floor to my colleague from Ontario, Yann.
Thank you, Jean-François. Yes, effectively, the next speaker is Yann Leborgne for Ontario. The floor is yours. And just to reassure the people who are online, I'm just taking note of the questions. We'll take them after Yann's presentation. Go ahead, Yann.
Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me. Thank you, yes, Thierry, for the intro. So my name is Yann Leborgne. I'm a senior commercial officer with Ontario's Ministry of Economic Development, and we have a network of 15 offices around the world, known as the Trade and Investment Office, and I'm based in the Paris office. Similar to Jean-François and IQ, our mandate is to provide assistance to companies that are considering investing in our province in Ontario, as well as supporting Ontario exporters. And without further ado, let's get started. So my first key message today is to highlight that, in case you didn't know already, Ontario is Canada's economic powerhouse. So the province is GDP is about 40% of Canada's. And so if you look at this wealth, it's roughly comparable to countries like the Netherlands or Switzerland. Then about 14 million people live on this territory. You see the map. So that's about the size of France and Spain combined. And so as you can also see, most of them live in the south, within a couple of hundred of kilometers or so from the border. And the largest cities, well, they're also in the south. So you see Toronto, the province's capital, as well as the area around it, known as the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area. The federal capital, Ottawa, in the east, is the second largest one. And so overall, of course, Ontario is a very mature, very diversified economy. One thing I want to emphasize, and what makes the province unique, is actually its very advanced manufacturing capabilities combined with a world-class ecosystem. Ontario is Canada's manufacturing core. So you would have maybe heard of Ontario as a leading ecosystem in the automotive sector. So depending on the year, Ontario's automotive sector is the first or second largest in North America. In Canada, we also have our own version of the Silicon Valley, and so we like to say it's located in Southern Ontario, where companies are developing solutions around AI, cybersecurity, quantum, etc. So basically Ontario and this area, the southwest of Ontario, that's the second largest concentration of tech companies and tech talent in North America after California. And with that, I'll move to the next slide, please. Another map just to focus this time on access to market and consumers. Ontario, very open to the rest of the world. Of course, we can take advantage of Canada's free trade agreements with Europe, with Asia, and even more so with the US and Mexico, similar to Quebec. But for us today, I think it's important to emphasize the importance of regional integration, because the US remains Canada's main trade partner, and a stat I like to share is that Ontario is the first or second trade partner to 28 American states. And really this very, very strong integration is reflected in the fact that, as you can see on the slide, daily two-day trade between Ontario and the US is over $1 billion. Next slide, please. Now I'll just highlight a couple more things from this slide before focusing on the defense sector. First issue I wanted to mention is the relatively low cost of doing business in Ontario. For manufacturers, Ontario has one of the lowest corporate tax rates in North America. There are also very interesting federal and provincial tax incentives, as well as tax write-offs on capital investments. And of course, in Canada, we love to compare ourselves to the US. And if you look at labor costs, salaries, healthcare costs for employers, Ontario also has a net advantage over most American states in the region. Then there's the issue of transportation. Ontario can rely on Toronto or Pearson in the center of the province, but more broadly, there are 4 international airports, 300 regional airports, 250,000 kilometers of roads, highways, dozen cross-border points with the US. So very, very good connectivity. And before I conclude on this slide, I will highlight also access to talent. Here I'm talking about the excellency of our post-secondary system. Toronto, in particular, known as the best university in Canada. But more generally speaking, it's possible to rely on the highly qualified, educated workforce at a fraction of the cost in other US states in the region. And well, you should maybe retain one more thing from this slide and from Ontario's competitiveness is the fact that it's generally very easy to do business in Ontario. There's very limited red tape. For instance, very simple to do a business registration and to collaborate with partners in the province. We'll get back to that. Next slide, please. Moving forward and focusing now on the defense sector. So this slide is both a reminder of what the defense sector typically comprises, as well as an opportunity for me to say that Ontario's defense sector has capabilities across all major subsectors. So if you take aerospace and space, naval, we have combat vehicles, munitions, weapons, soldier systems, C4ISR, command control, comms, computers, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. So we cover pretty much the full spectrum. Next slide, please. And here are a few more facts and data for you. So Ontario's defense sector, that's basically the largest one in Canada, whether we talk about annual revenues, jobs, number of companies. The Canadian government is an important buyer, of course, but very important to note, as you can see on the bottom left-hand corner of the slide, that over 50% of goods and services are actually exported. So reflecting on the point that Colonel Bundy was making earlier, setting up a business activity in Canada will allow you to access federal procurement under the ITB policy, whereby you bring economic benefits to Canada, but can also and will ideally lead to export. And well, another important issue that I really want to emphasize for you is the fact that Ontario is a special place for collaboration. So yes, we have 3 of the world's top 5 defense companies, 300 companies in the sector, 16 engineering schools, very important research centers, meaning that there are genuine partnership opportunities between business, academia, and government. Next slide. By now you have understood that I love maps. Here's another one for you, showing the main defense hubs in the province. So you see in the southwest, near the city of London, there's an important focus on armored vehicles. That's where General Dynamics Land System has a major presence. In the center of the province, in the Greater Toronto area, there's a hub focused around ICT, manufacturing of systems and components. One good example there is L3 Harris. I'll get back to that later. And further east in the Ottawa regions, where you find a world-class cluster of companies in ICT for defense. Thales Canada has operations there, so does Lockheed Martin. And I think what's important to note is that these companies generally have an extensive supply chain around them. So for GDLS in the southwest, for instance, we're talking about 40 companies in the London area, but also over 500 supply partners across Ontario. Next slide, please. And as I'm about to conclude, I wanted to give you an overview of the most important defense companies in Ontario. So here, the point that I want to make is related to what we were saying earlier around the diversity of the defense industry and the fact that we cover the full ecosystem. So I will not be going through each of those items, of course, in the interest of time. I will just highlight a few of those and mention a couple of iconic products. So if we look at command and control systems, for instance, you see Lockheed Martin. So they're the prime contractor and combat system integrator for the Halifax class frigates of the Royal Canadian Navy. And they will continue this role with the Canadian Surface Combatant, known as the CSC. That's Canada's next generation warship. Lockheed Martin is also the ship integrator on the Canadian Surface Combatant, the next generation that will be the major warship. So you'll see that their presence is extremely important. I had mentioned Thales earlier. They are the main contractor for providing in-service support for Canada's Arctic and offshore patrol ships and joint support ships. If we take a quick look at armored vehicles, there is General Dynamics, as I had already mentioned. So they're the largest supplier of armored military vehicles of the Canadian Armed Forces. And also interesting to note that about 85% of the company's revenues come from exports. And then with the few seconds that I have left, I will touch on surveillance and targeting systems and mention L3 Harris. And so you maybe know that this company is known for making the Westcam MX series in Ontario, which is often used in aircraft and drones in particular. And so this their technology in particular has been deployed in Ukraine as part of a multi-million-dollar aid package just recently. And so L3 Harris, for the French audience on the line, they have customers in France, including the Gendarmerie, the Armée de l'Air, and so for instance, their systems are used in the on the Eurocopter AS350 that the Gendarmerie owns, and on the A400M transport aircraft. Next slide, please. A slide that I won't spend any time on because I know we are running out of time. So if we share the deck, people will be able to take a closer look later. But it was just a recap of the various reasons why Ontario is an amazing investment destination. So that's it for me. And for this overview of Ontario's defense sectors, thank you for your attention. And you will find my contact details. Please feel free to reach out.
Thank you very much, Yann. Very, very good presentation indeed. A very good presentation for both Quebec and Ontario. And I know it's not easy to capture in a few minutes everything about a particular province in Canada. But anyway, thanks for taking the time. I was looking at the chat and the questions that very kindly Jean-François has already answered. In particular, and I guess I don't need to go back to some of them unless maybe Yann or Bruno, you have some additional comments to make, in particular on the cloud market. I guess it's the cloud market in general, and in particular in Quebec and Ontario. I don't know if you have additional information to the one that Jean-François has put in the chat, in the conversation channel. Bruno or Yann, do you have any particular insight on the cloud market or cloud services market, especially for SMEs, if I understand the question from Christelle Tamarin?
Not too much to add on my end. This is Yann here.
Okay.
Good answer from Jean-François. I mean, the market is also emerging strongly in Ontario, of course, and Jean-François had noted the renewable energies. That was a big asset for Quebec. Just an opportunity for me to highlight that over 90% of Ontario's energy is also non-carbon based. So we are also seeing a significant increase in the cloud business on our end.
Thank you. Now, Bruno, do you want to add something on the cloud market?
Not specifically. The cloud market is quite large. In fact, it could be with more precision. We perhaps could help, but no, I don't have any more information than before.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. What we will do now is that I will give the floor back to Julie to describe very briefly the calls for interest. As you know, the idea there is that those who are on the webinar and those who are interested by the mission, the Canadian mission, they have to apply. So this will be what Julie will represent to you now. And then I will briefly tell you a bit more about the current status of the program for the mission. And then we should have some time for questions and answers. So if you want to prepare your questions in the chat, or then afterwards raise your hand to ask questions. But I will first of all ask Julie to come back on the stage, so to speak, and then tell us how to apply to the mission for Canada.
Thank you, Thierry. And I don't know if I can take the opportunity to ask myself a question
sure,
to our speaker, or if you want me to wait for the end of the webinar.
Please do, please do.
Okay. Yeah, my question is, we know that the textile industry, specifically the technical textile industry in Canada, it's a quite strong industry there. We are in contact with, for example, a technical center like CTT Group and some technical textile association in Canada. And well, the industry is working on dual use markets, obviously, but not only. So I was wondering if you had some inputs or insight that you could share with us on this industry, if it's an industry you've been working on already.
So your question is for Jean-François and or Yann.
Yes,
correct, Julie?
Yes, because we are targeting Ontario and Quebec. So
and Quebec.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, guys, who wants to start?
I can start. To be completely transparent, I did not have the chance to work on many businesses, like many cases of dual textiles and these kind of things. I do know that in Montreal, the textile industry is working on very specific IT textiles, especially more on the sports side. I heard a lot more, Lululemon, Canada Goose, they do have facilities there, and they're working on very specific kind of IT textiles.
Like wearables.
Yeah, wearables. So am I the right person to give you the answer right here, right now? Absolutely not, to be completely transparent. Although I know that there are things being done, there's also a cluster in Montreal that exists surrounding, the wearables and the tech wearables, textiles. So I could definitely reach out to them and put people in contact with them if needed. And then I do know also that the McGill University and University of Montreal, as well as Polytechnique, they do have research chairs that are working on wearables. So is it aiming towards defense? I have no clue. Is it possible to replicate what is being done in the sport industry or other sectors to the defense? Might be. Even though we're talking about dual, so it's civil and defense. So that would be interesting to navigate through what they do and really understand it more. But I would be happy to make introductions to the right clusters and research shares.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yann, do you want to add something for Ontario?
I mean, I wish my answer would be a non-answer because this is pretty specific too, and I'm not aware of. And also, I don't have very specific facts and data around the use of textile for defense, security, military purposes. I'd be happy to look into this. Similarly to Jean-François, I can also connect you with the relevant folks or look for data that will be relevant to your mission. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, indeed.
Thank you very much.
As we will do just afterwards, when we talk about the program, obviously we are happy to have you helping us to navigate both provinces. And effectively, once we've done the selection, which Julie will talk about in a minute, we'll have a better idea who's joining the mission and who, what profiles the companies have, those who are really in textile and what kind of a sector in textile, like what kind of product, and also to what extent they are dual technology, whether they, what is the link with defense, or whether they effectively they can at least have contacts in the two provinces in these areas. So, but anyway, we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, what I can say also is that I mean, connected wearables are in fact like IoTs, basically. So it's like just objects, but in this case, it's wearables, it's textile that is connected. So obviously, everything that is related to the IoT AI sector, which is strong in Montreal, mostly in Montreal, although there are a few things, like interesting things in Quebec City as well, because they have a very strong ecosystem in terms of optronics and photonics. Which can be, I guess, applicable to the connected wearables as well. So we would need to dig deeper as this very specific sector, but what I do know is that many other ecosystems indirectly would have a strong impact on this sector and on the businesses that would be willing to travel with you to Canada. So, so yeah, I mean, we could explore like everything that surrounds, I would say, the main topic of this mission. So
great, thank you for the inputs, and I think we will be able to work more in details in the program once we will have the delegation of companies complete, I would say. So that's a good introduction to this slide. So regarding I mentioned as in an introduction, but so EU Alliance is co-funded by the European Union. So all the work that we have been doing for the organization of the mission is something that is covered by the European Union. But we also open a call for SMEs selection. Every time we go to a new country, there is a specific call where SMEs can apply. We will accept in terms of structure in the delegation. It's mostly SMEs, but other companies could join the delegation, but without funding. It has to be located in the European Union and working in the fields that we cover in the project. But as I said before, the field is pretty broad, covering many industries dealing with dual use. And to apply, it's something we wanted to have very simple and easy. So there is an application template in English that you have to send back to me. The deadline for that is March 31st. The application template is pretty easy. It's about 3 slides. One is to present your company and your product and your added value. what you want to offer in Canada, and if you have previous experience in this market. So we will close the call on March 31st, and then we will take about 1 week to 10 days to evaluate all the applications. And for the companies selected, you will be able also to join the delegation and to also have a funding of up to €1,000 to attend the mission. And that's about it. So that's something pretty easy and pretty fast. And yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to get back to me. And I think we can move on to the program, Thierry, to the draft.
Yeah,
to the draft program.
And that will be the last piece of information we would like to share with you. And it's the next slide. Thank you very much. So you can see here it's the tentative program. It's still a draft program. We're still working on it. Before I go into the actual outline here, just to mention, there's a little logo that you can see at the bottom of the slides for the 29th of May and the 31st of May in Ottawa. And as you can see, the mission is split between the two cities. The logo is the one of another EU-funded project, also funded through COSME. It's called CATS for Dual Use. The project is also about dual-use technologies. A bit more, I would say, more on the IT deep tech, less on textile, to my recollection. But we have agreed with the Commission and with our counterparts in case for dual use that the mission would basically, we would help one another. In other words, that we will try to make sure that the two delegations, especially when talking to our Canadian colleagues, that the two delegations would basically try to coordinate their efforts in order to attend and organize events. So this is what you see basically there. So the idea is to arrive the weekend of the 27th, 28th of May, directly in Montreal. The Monday the 29th, which is common with CATS for dual use, the program will be with the other delegations, so we'll have a fairly large delegation at this point, is to give an overview of the local ecosystem. There will be briefing seminars on interculturality, regulation, business ethics, and so on and so forth. The afternoon will be dedicated to matchmaking with local companies or local organizations in general. Then on the 30th of May, that's where we will have a separate program, meaning that this will be purely for the EU Alliance delegation. And as you can see, what we're looking at is to organize the delegation according to the two main sectors that are in EU Alliance, the one on textile. We are working on a program with the CTT group. And on deep tech, this still has to be confirmed with local stakeholders in this area in Montreal. So this we still need to complete, and then networking event in the afternoon. Then on the last day of the program in Montreal, the idea is to travel by train. There's a fast train between Montreal and Ottawa in order to be in Ottawa in the evening of the 30th, so that we can have a program on the 31st of May in Ottawa. As you can see, very much dedicated to defense. Why? Simply because the dates we have chosen for this mission actually corresponds to a big fair in Ottawa called CANSEC, Canadian Security Market Fair. And there will be a lot of players and stakeholders in Ottawa on those dates, and we hope to leverage that. Even if we're not sure that we would have access to the actual fair itself, we're hoping to have a number of side events, which is what you can see here on these slides. And thanks to the support of again, local stakeholders and agencies, Canadian agencies. There is still something which we need to clarify on the 1st of June, whether or not there will be enough activities in Ottawa to warrant staying another day, or whether or not we will go back to Montreal. This is still very much a work in progress. but you have basically the sort of overall architecture of the project, and splitting the time between Montreal, Quebec, and Ontario, and therefore Ottawa. And then the idea is to wrap up and fly back to Europe on the 2nd of June, which I believe is a Friday, if I'm not mistaken. So this is very much a tentative program. We are still working on it. Obviously, it will be easier once we know who's taking part in the mission, so we can then be more specific and try to address more specific needs. But this is where we are at this point. I can see we have more or less reached the time allocated to this webinar, but if there are any questions, please feel free to, if you want to do it now, feel free to put that in the chat, or raise your hand if you have a pressing questions you want to be answered now. And otherwise, if you haven't, obviously you have all our details, including Julie, and my colleague Leo Benedetti is also on the call. He's helped me to prepare this webinar, and we'd like to thank him for that. And Leo is actually will be directly responsible for the organization of the mission. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact Leo as well. He's the one who sent you the invitation for the webinar. And I think that's pretty much what we wanted to share with you. Have I missed something? Julie, Leo, do you think there's anything that we need to specify? No?
No, I think we're good, and we will, yeah, once we will have all the companies, we will be able to work deeper in the program. So, yeah. Yeah,
and that's why obviously we wanted to give you. I know that the time is short to apply, but it's very quick. It's very short. It's not the typical EU-funded program.
No.
And it's not Horizon Europe. We're talking about a very small project here. Then so it's only a few slides. If you have something you want to do in Canada, then this is probably a good opportunity of doing that. It's the best conditions for doing it, to be honest. So do apply, do ask questions if you need clarification, and then we look forward to working with you on this mission. And thanks again for your participation and your time.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. All the best. Bye-bye.